How you doing, Lisa?
Eric, I'm living the dream. I'm super pumped to be here today.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to get to know you today. I'm going to introduce you. You're an LA based hairdresser. I was going to say Orange County, but you can give us the whole story and the background between that. Maybe it used to be Orange County.
No, I'm based out of OC. I'm based in
Okay.
Newport, but I travel from Newport to Huntington Beach to West Hollywood into San Diego.
Well, so you're driving a lot.
Yeah, a lot. I put a lot of miles on my car since I moved to California.
I bet. I bet. And traffic has gotten so much worse. This is for the Southern California listeners, and we have a lot of Southern California listeners. The traffic in LA has gotten brutal since the fires.
Yeah. I've only been back a couple of times just to, give LA the space to breathe.
Uh-huh.
I
Thank
think
you.
this past time it took me like 2.5, almost 3 hours just to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of reeling back and just kind of LA's hurt right now, and I feel for LA.
Yeah. So PCH is closed. That's really what's causing it. And
Oh,
so a lot of the traffic that PCH kind of allowed to go from south to north and north to south, kind of on the western, coastal side of the city, they can't do that. So all of that traffic is on the 405 and the 101, along with everybody else. So just a little bit additional traffic is causing, an extra 30% travel time. So for me to get to the city, I'm kind of in the North Valley. For me to get down to Beverly Hills area or South Bay, it's like an extra 30 minutes at least.
easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
I There's a reason why. I mean, no offense to LA, but there's a reason why I don't live in LA.
There's a lot of people here
Yeah,
and
there's a
we all have
lot.
cars.
Yes, yeah, and I'm like, I would rather just take a train or take a bus if
I
I lived
wish there was
there.
a train. Well, so
Oh,
we've
yeah,
been
there's not a
building a
lot. Yeah,
train. We've been
yeah.
building a train. I think it's like 10 or 12 years that we've been trying to get a train. And I'm going to have some listeners maybe calling me out if I get the details wrong. But I think it only goes from like downtown to maybe Santa Monica or somewhere in West LA, and it's got a couple stops in between, and that's
Mm,
it. And it's been like 10 years that they've been trying to get this thing out of the ground. Construction everywhere, which, by the way, also hinders traffic
yeah.
as they cut off lanes, to build this train. I don't know if this train is ever going to get done, but
At this
and
point, I
then
don't know.
if it gets done, I don't know if anyone's going to take it, but hopefully it takes a few cars off the road when it's finally done. But this is just normal stuff for a big city. That our New York listeners are like, you know what, dude, shut the fuck up. Like,
No,
you have no
literally.
idea what you're talking about. They have like congestion pricing and all sorts of other complications.
I know we really do have it made here. I know I can't gripe too much. I'm from the East Coast, so I know New York, but still LA just takes it to a different level, I think, because
Yeah,
it's even smaller. Whereas New York, all of New York is kind of like that.
right. It's true. It's true. At least we have better weather here. We
We
don't
do.
have, yeah.
I
Now
run with
and
the windows
then,
down all the time, and I love it. Hey, I'll sit in
right.
traffic as long as my windows are down.
Like today, it's like
Oh my gosh,
77 degrees,
it's
just
beautiful.
absolutely perfect.
So if it's 2 hours of traffic, I'm okay. Windows are
Yeah,
down, music's blaring, the
there you go.
beautiful weather. I mean, it'll take me a lot longer to get some coffee, but that's okay, you know?
There you go. There you go. All right, I'll continue with the introduction. You're a Southern California, how about that? A Southern
Yeah.
California hairdresser and educator with your own platform called Straight Out of Cosmo, as well as with Paul Mitchell Professional.
Hmm.
And you're a podcaster, as I just learned. And so we're going to get into all of that. But let's just start with you personally. Where are you from? And why did you get into this business?
Gosh. Well, thank you so much for having me on this glorious podcast. So there's a long story to this. I'm initially from France. I came to the States when I was super small. I don't have a cool accent because I lost it.
Bummer.
Um, I know. You know how much cooler I would have been if I
Oh
had a
my
French
God. You could
accent?
like charge double for
Yeah,
your services.
just
Yeah.
because.
Just because.
Truly. A
Yeah.
redheaded French woman. Like, I'm here to tell you.
Oh my God. I could see it. I could hear the accent right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Visualize for me so I can manifest it back into my life.
You should feign the accent. I'm not even going to try. You should feign the accent and see if you could raise your prices faster.
I will. Well, I mean, I can start greeting people in French, like bonjour, comment ça va? You know?
There you go.
Yeah,
You've
I can
got
still
it.
do it. I can
Oh
still
my
do
God, you
it.
could totally do it.
But yes, I came from France, super small. Both my parents are immigrants, and we all immigrated to the States. We came here, I don't even know, umpteen years ago, but I've lived in Delaware my whole life, and that's where I started everything. That's where I started my career. And then I actually moved to California in 2021,
Okay.
and I love
What?
it. I mean,
What? Hold on. What is Delaware? I don't want you to just skip over Delaware. I mean, how is Delaware? I've never been to Delaware. Delaware is a small state.
it is.
I imagine most of the listeners haven't spent much time, if any, in Delaware. Do
No reason
people? I don't know. I mean, there must be beautiful parts of Delaware. Do people go on vacation, maybe East Coasters to Delaware?
Oh yeah, Delaware is known for their beaches. We
Okay.
are. It's a touristy state because of the coast, because we're right on the coast. But Delaware is cute. Delaware is the place that you go to retire. You know, Delaware is where you can raise a family for sure. It's very quiet. Not a lot going on. I don't want to shit on Delaware, you know, because that's where I started my career. But you know, it's just a quiet state with not a lot going on. That's all I have
Okay.
to say about that. You know, but
Yeah.
growing up there was really, it was fun. It was unique in its own capacity, especially coming from immigrant family. You know, a lot of European culture in Delaware, where Delaware is just kind of like a hodgepodge of culture. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, there's not much to say about Delaware. I loved it for what it was. It's where I started my career. It's where I started, you know, this obsession with hair. And I actually went to a vocational technical high school, so I graduated at 17 with my license. And
Nice.
I've been behind the chairs technically since I was 15, before I could even drive.
Wow.
You know, I was stealing my car that I my parents bought a couple times a week, and they wouldn't know because they would be at work, and I'd go to work and come back, and I did get caught a couple times, but no, that's
Driving
neither here
without
nor
a
there.
license?
Yeah, you know, so you just got to do what you got to do.
Rebel.
I was a wild child, you know,
Delaware.
but
Yeah, Delaware didn't know what it had when it had you.
no, it didn't, and I'm glad it didn't, because there's
Yeah.
a lot of things I should not have been doing, like driving without a license.
Okay, so hold on. Your love for hair, you
Yes.
alluded to that, and when did that start? Did it start when you were itty bitty, or maybe like when you first got into high school? You know, talk about that.
You know, I've always was super artistic. I was painting a lot. I was always super musically driven, and I loved art and drew a lot, you know, but the affinity for hair didn't really start until one day. I'll never forget it. I was drawing on a t-shirt. I was making a band tee for like a local band, and my hair dipped into the paint. And I was like, "Oh, this is like, wait, hold on, you know, color on hair." I'm like, oh, that's kind of rad. Like, that's kind of neat, you know? And I was like, you know, this is kind of cool. And at the time, I was in high school, I was in Polytech, and they had a cosmetology program, and it, like, you know, two and two kind of came together. And then that's where it started. I was like, oh, wait, people do this. Like, you can do hair for a living. And I started at Polytech. So I was probably like 13, 14 when like this whole obsession kind of started. But shout out to Brenda Porter. She was my cosmetology teacher. She saw that I had this obsession with hair. My parents were super against it. You know, being traditional immigrants, they wanted me to be a doctor, and like
Yeah.
wanted me to be much better than what I was,
Lawyer.
you know, lawyer, you know, just like something with stature, you know.
Right.
And no, Brenda, she was like, you have this love and this natural talent for hair. I want you in my program. And without her, I wouldn't have gotten my license and would not have been who I am today.
Very interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, so Polytechnic High School, is that a choice or was that the default?
Yes. So Polytech is a school you have to get accepted to at the time. And it's technically, it's a trade high school, you know, so there's like different criteria that you have to have in order to go to the school. And it's so interesting now kind of thinking about that, because my parents were so adamant about me being a doctor, a lawyer, like all these things, but sent me to a trade school. You know, like did not want me to go to the traditional public high schools. They wanted me to go to Polytech. So it's kind of funny. I'm realizing that now, like that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So what kind of kids were these, all artistic oriented kids, or were there some technically oriented engineering kind of kids who were going there? Like, did they think that maybe you were going to develop some, I don't know, technology skills?
Yeah, I think, now thinking about it, yes, there was a healthcare rehab program. There was software building programs. There
Mm,
was radio TV. There was business. There was these other very technical parts of the school. And actually, now that I'm saying this, they did put me in the healthcare rehab program,
there you
wanting me
go.
to do like PT or something. And I remember going to the program and they look at me and they're like, no, like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I don't know. My parents just told me to be here. I don't know.
That's funny. So no Dr. Lisa. Okay. So
No.
so they had a hair program there.
Yeah, a cosmetology program.
Amazing. Amazing.
And it
And
was,
so go ahead, tell me about
uh,
how many kids.
you know, not many, maybe 20.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe 20, but it was, you had to do 3,000 hours and it was over the
Oh
course
my
of,
God. 3,000. You know what?
okay, I lied. I lied. The 3,000 hours is the apprenticeship program in Delaware.
That makes sense. But I think Delaware, it is one of those high hour states.
Yes, it's 1,500.
Okay. So that, I think that's lowered
Oh,
because I think
yes.
it, and it's been lowering all over the country. There's a few states around the country that are vastly more demanding from a time standpoint than
Hmm.
others. Some are
Hmm.
like 800 hours, and it's changed over time. But anyway, okay. So Delaware, how many hours did you have to put in to cosmetology training in this?
1,500. I had to do
Okay,
1,500 hours. And then you had to do, I don't remember, but it might have been like 500 hours outside of school,
okay, like
like
like at a
like a
salon somewhere.
co-op. Yeah,
Okay,
it was a co-op.
and were you good or bad?
I was so good.
Just right out of the gate.
Yeah, like I just had this. Like I hate to say this, but hair was one of those things that came really natural to me
Mhm.
because I think because of I was so artistically inclined that hair I just became obsessed because I got to do paint and art, but on hair. And of
Yeah.
course, like I didn't know the technical stuff, like when I was doing hair, like I didn't know cortex and cuticle and like porosity. Like I didn't pay attention to any of that. All I cared about was the artistic freedom of applying hair color and cutting and whatever. And yeah, I hate to say that, but yeah, I was good. I was like the baby of the group of the salon that I was at, who everybody wanted to come to me because I was funky and loud and just obsessed, with this job. And I built I built my success very quickly at a young age, I think.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like the picture is forming. You have all this passion for it. And that's attractive to clients. I mean, for
Hmm.
somebody, like you just described, to be young and passionate and excited. A lot of clients that I run into that I talk about just in normal social conversation when they hear about what I do, and then they inevitably tell me about their hairdresser, or they just switched, or they want to switch, or they're happy, or whatever. When they want to switch, it's because they get bored with their hairdresser. The hairdresser does the same thing every time, month after month, visit after visit, year after year. And they're like, oh, I'm kind of thinking about a change. And I'm always like, I encourage them. I say, well, do you ask your hairdresser what they think, what they would do if you ask for a change? And I encourage them to do that. But they think that their hairdresser just gets stuck in a rut. And then they start thinking grass is greener. And you might be that greener grass. You probably were in that environment as the kind of a young, hip, highly passionate person.
Yeah, yeah. And I hear that conversation a lot. And I always try to remind hairdressers obsession beats talent every time. You
I
know,
like that.
your obsession and your creativity and your love for your job will always continue to outshine your true talent. You can be, I hate to say this, but you can be a terrible hairdresser. Like, let's just call it honest. You can really just be fucking people up, you know? But if you just have this charisma and you just love what you do and you're dedicated to this craft, people will love you no matter what,
Right.
you know? And that was what I did. I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I was, oh God, I was frying people, you know, giving half-ass blow dries, but they didn't care because I was just so energetic and obsessed. And I wasn't afraid to tell them, oh, I'm so excited for this placement. I'm going to try this new blow dry technique. And they were just like, okay, I don't know what the cycle's doing, but I'm in it. You know, it was like a show. People,
Yeah.
and I involved them in the show. And that's kind of like remained true throughout my entire career. I kind of just bullshitted my way through. You know, I learned as I went, you know, but this obsession of me talking about it and being so energetic, even like talking to you 13 years later, I'm still just as like a lunatic about it, you know, and it's gotten me very far.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. I think that's phenomenal advice. I think it's fantastic. And I know a lot of listeners are like, God, she's right. And you know, sometimes you hear about people who are kind of stuck in a rut and things like that. And I imagine you've had this conversation a number of times with people who feel, for hairdressers, beauty professionals generally, who feel stuck in a rut, maybe burnt out, you know, is another term people use. And what do you often say to that person?
I always tell them, do something outside of your realm. So in this case, I went to a podcasting conference. Regardless of the fact that I podcast, I don't take it super seriously, but I took education outside of my realm, and to see their excitement and to see the way that they view things and their mechanisms and all their things really re-inspired me and reminded me as a creative, at the heart of everything, we are creative people, right? Like, take our titles off. Okay, you got a license, that's great. But at the heart and the core of why you do what you do, think of the creativity. So do things outside of what your day-to-day looks like. You know, don't take a hair class. I mean, I'm a I love hair education, don't get me wrong, but I love taking education from other professionals that don't do what I do and don't even know anything about the hair world, and seeing their passion, their creativity, and how they view things. And it always gets me out of my funk every time.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
It's like seeing how the world works outside of your world. Because I think sometimes we get stuck in our bubble and the repetition, right? But why don't you try something that's totally against the grain? Actually, great conversation I had with Jamie Dana. What she does is she does improv comedy.
I didn't know that. She does improv comedy like herself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
To keep her re-inspired and to keep her kind of in the game. Because it's outside of the hair world and it gives her a new perspective. It allows her to be funny in like a different capacity, but it's still super creative.
Oh yeah. That's that's like taking a different hobby. I mean, that's really fascinating. I didn't know that she did that. Sorry, Jamie, if you're listening to this and you heard me spill your tea, but I just remember us talking about that on one of the episodes I did with her. And I was like, improv comedy, like, why would you do that? And she's like, you know, kind of explaining outside of the creative world, like you can still fill that cup in a different way, but it keeps you excited and kind of like go back and forth with all that. So that's my advice. Absolutely. You know, get outside of your own world. I think that's great advice. Okay. So you graduate from your technical high school / cosmetology school. And then did you go to work for this salon that you had been kind of assisting in, like during the cosmetology training? Yeah.
I started a salon with a hairdresser that I love, David Blight. I was his assistant, but that ended up not working out too well, which was fine. And but then when I actually graduated, I worked with the salon that I ended up finishing my high school career with. And that's where everything kind of started making sense. You know, I was forced to go to college. My parents were like, you have to go to college. Even though you have this Cosmo license, you still got to go to college. I was like, okay. And I went to college for about like a year and a half, and I paid for the whole thing myself. And I'll never forget. I actually have it tattooed, let go, let live, tattooed on my shoulders because the day that I had to drop out was the day that I refused to live other people's dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hey, parents, I'm sorry, but I like this hair thing. This hair thing is really cool, and it really gave me a sense of worth, a sense of validation, a sense of to keep going. And yeah, I worked at Beehive Beauty Shop. Is that thing? What it is? Beehive Beauty Shop? Yeah, for a couple years. That blew up. There's a whole story with that, and went to another salon. That kind of went sideways. Went to another salon. That kind of went sideways, and I realize now as an adult, I just was very mouthy and
No.
no, right? Me, no, never. Very excited about my success. And that intimidated some people. And that also didn't work well with other people. So there was a lot of growth that I had to do. And so then I opened my own salon at 19
Oh, okay. In Delaware.
in Delaware. Yeah.
All right. How'd that go?
Incredible. One of the best things I ever did. I learned so much and I did it at a young age. And my God, anyone who's listening to this, I did everything so illegally. Oh my gosh. Like hindsight 2020, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a 19-year-old who just wanted a place to do hair. And I shouldn't even be saying this, but it just is what it is. Like I was just a young, dumb hairstylist at the time who just didn't know what they were doing. And I owned it for 6 years and I had a team and it was just so much fun to be young and to just be obsessed with this thing. And yeah, I ended up kind of realizing that Delaware was kind of holding me back and I'd kind of outgrown my role as an owner as well. And I wanted to be at ground zero again. So I decided to sell the salon and move out to California.
Okay. So was it more Delaware or was it just your role at the salon that you didn't like? I mean, if you had a
both.
salon in LA, would you have been happy?
Honestly, yes, because LA has this energy that there's so many doors in LA, like figuratively and literally, right? Delaware was super small and it's fantastic for routine, like the day to day. You don't expand in Delaware. It's not equipped with the tools and the places, the people, the things to do that. And there was just something about LA. I don't know. I remember I flew out here in 2017 by myself. I just booked a trip and came out here on the whim, and the energy that LA had, I was like, whoa, but unlike anything I've ever experienced. So yeah, I do eventually want to open a space here. And I truly think that it's just like the force of energy that's here, this creative force field of energy that's in LA that I think if it was different, I still would have stayed. I still would have kept it open if it was here.
Well, all that makes a lot of sense. All right. When did you start educating?
Oh, I started educating, 2017, 2018.
And was this a passion or did somebody ask? How did that happen?
It was not I mean, it was a passion, but it wasn't. I got approached by Kenra Professional, and because I would talk about their products nonstop, not realizing like, oh, that's educating. And they asked me to be an educator, and they're like, one day you're going to cross that path, but you're not going to be behind the chair. And I was like, no, you're crazy. Like, I will always be a hairdresser through and through, And it's funny now because now I'm in a different role. But either way, yeah, I educated for them for a couple of years, and that kind of opened up my world on what it looks like to be an educator and how many people you can help. I think innately as hairdressers, we are people pleasers and we always want to help people. We as hairdressers, you want to help your clients. And that took that complex to a whole other level. And a new obsession was born. I not only was obsessed with providing quality top results to clients, but now I have this new obsession where I want to provide help and support to stylists to get them where they're going. So yeah, that started then, and here we are now. I have my own education company, and I have my own tour, and I teach more so now about mindset because I learned as well. I can teach you till I'm blue in the face on how to do hair. We can all teach placement, we can all teach color corrections and things like that. But if you don't believe in yourself to apply the things that I'm telling you, the money you just paid and the time you just took to learn from me means nothing.
So how do you do that? How do you teach a better mindset?
So I've gone through a lot of somatic and trauma therapy to learn where anxiety lives in the body and where anxiety lives in your day to day and what it looks like when it comes up. So I like to incorporate a lot of somatic practices, somatic therapy practices. So one of the things is like grounding. A client comes in and their energy is really off. So how do you ground yourself in a situation like that? There is, flicking off the anxiety. So flicking off the anxiety with your hands. So this really, really hard if you're super anxious. Yeah. You got to flick it hard.
Listeners are flicking their hands as they're driving.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're steering with their knees.
Deep breath practices. There's a lot of things you can say out loud. There's a lot of different things that I will teach a technique, but pause. Okay, so you might be feeling anxiety here. How can we ground ourselves when we're behind the chair? Doing some intentional breaths. And also the thing that I think we often forget as hairstylists is that we're human, right? So letting a client know, hey, I'm having a little bit of anxiety today. I just want to let you know, if I'm a little bit quiet, this is where I'm at. So communicating to your client, I didn't get enough sleep last night. I'm just feeling a little bit anxious. Creating a safer dynamic with the client is going to allow the stylist, I think, to perform better because now the client understands where the stylist is at. There's so much I can go on to this, but that's kind of how I incorporate that with, again, I can teach you till I'm blue in the face on how to do hair, but if you don't believe in yourself, I can't help you.
This reminds me of a post on your gram, and you start after 13 years that you're not afraid to admit that. And then it's a scroll. And the first one is taking new clients still freaks you out. Mm-hmm. And then there's subsequent scrolls, and each one is kind of a little tidbit, if you will, that has to do with mindset. And I think that this is a really good post because I think a lot of people feel that way. And the fact that you are you and you do what you do at a high level, and you're still freaked out when you get a new client is very interesting. So talk about that a little bit.
Anxiety is a normal feeling, I think, when meeting anyone new. And yeah, I mean, still as 13 years in, still very confident in what I offer, but it's like going on a date for the first time, even though like you're really excited, but you're also like, oh my gosh, like what if this doesn't work out? Like what if, this guy or girl ends up being super weird or like something happens, right? There's always like the little bit of what ifs. Mm-hmm. So even like meeting a new client, even though like there's been so much communication, like I do a lot of consultation or whatever, but it's still like this thrill of like, what if it doesn't work out? Like what if this color ends up not being the thing that we want? Or there's still like a lot of what ifs, like regardless if you've been doing it for 30 years and it's still, the root of it is, it's still what if, like you just never know. Right. Like the toss up of interactions like that, it still freaks me the hell out.
You called it the thrill. That's the positive part, right? The excitement. Yeah. And some people who know more about this stuff than I do, like you're talking, you've studied it, that the sense of excitement and anxiety sometimes and nervousness can be a similar kind of feeling, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of reframed it from an anxious thing to a thrilling thing. And I think that that's really important because the unknown of a new client and the experience that you're about to have with them can be a negative one, or it could end up being a really positive one. Most people tend to worry about the worst case scenario, that it's going to be a negative experience, when I think it's nice to balance out your expectations and think this could be a really great experience. I think just the essence of the experience is this is a customer, and it's probably more likely that they're going to become a good long-term customer for you than vice versa. So doesn't it make sense to maybe lean into the positive potential outcome?
Yes. Right. Like it's like a no-brainer, but the human experience immediately always goes to the negative. And
Yeah.
the thing that I always like to say is, so there's two things I like to say to that. So we're like, what if, what if, what if, what if? And I like to kind of counteract those thoughts, and I just say, what if it works out?
Yeah.
What a thought process. Like, what if they end up loving you? What if you guys have a really good time? And I try to reframe, like I honor the what ifs. I honor that because I still have them, but I still reframe that mind, and I say, wait, well, what if it does work out? What if this person ends up being really cool? What if this person tells all their friends about me and I get to blow up with success? I would rather focus on this thrill that's going to catapult me rather than a thrill that's going to keep me stuck in this anxious piece. And the other side of that is, by default, us as humans like to give ourselves two options. And, I know we haven't talked much, but I come from a very abusive background. So,
Sorry.
There's a lot of history with that as well. And as a child, I only had one option, and that was to survive. So as an adult, I still keep that. I don't ever give myself a plan B, because there isn't one. There is no option for, oh, this is going to blow up, because then you're going to fixate on that thing. Instead, what if option A was the only option you have? What if this is going to be the best hair experience that they'll ever have? It's delusional, like Delulu is a Slulu, like that whole thing became a fad, but it's true. What if we can just constantly reframe our mind to living in a place of positivity and only one option of forward? Obviously, it's important to have the skills when things go sideways. You need to battle those things, because there's going to be times where that's going to happen. But what if I just choose to live my life in the positive place?
Yeah.
Because it is a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So the second slider is, again, this is you've been a hairstylist 13 years and you're not afraid to admit ... The second one is, I question why the hell anyone would ever want to book with me. Do you really have self-doubt like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's gotten really prevalent. Actually, I just taught my first stage show this past weekend in Chicago, ABS.
Congrats.
And thank you. And I was on stage with some of the most reputable people in the industry, been doing it for 30 years, just so long, like as long as I've been alive, and I'm like, dude, why the hell am I on this stage with these people? And the doubt comes from, there are other people who are more qualified than me, who've been doing it longer, who've been, just are better, quote unquote, better than me. There's that cap, like that other side, right? But ultimately, it says a lot, and this is really why I really value myself as a stylist. Is it says a lot about my clients who choose me over everybody else, and I really try to nurture that relationship. So again, back to that plan A, they chose me. They wanted to sit in my chair. They're paying my price. Let me just focus on that fact instead of focusing on the latter.
Yeah, exactly. We talk about meditation sometimes on the podcast, not that often. I've done episodes with a master Buddhist meditation person who's a very good friend of mine. And don't tell her that I just butchered her official title. But she and her husband run the Buddhist Meditation Center where I live in Thousand Oaks, California. And we did, I think it was 2 episodes where she did a guided meditation for everyone. And a lot of this has to do with just your ability to gain control of your thinking, right? Because if you don't gain control of your thinking, our thinking can spiral in any unknown direction. And many of those directions are not healthy directions. Just because your brain wants to think about something doesn't mean that that's what you should be thinking about. And this is a little bit controversial for some people because a lot of people haven't really thought about this before, and they think, well, it's my brain. If I'm thinking about this, if I'm thinking about a meteor striking the earth and killing everybody immediately, well, that must be worthy of my thought. But it's not.
It's not. You're always in complete control of your reality based on how you view the world. So again, you could totally fixate on these like negative thoughts, and it's so much easier to. But what if, and I always say, like, allow your curiosity to take over. What if I decide today that I don't want to feel like shit and I want to drink more water? I'm going to get kind of curious about that, And so I'm right there with you. Your thoughts control and dictate everything. So if you go into a hair service and automatically you're like, fuck, this is going to be terrible. I'm going to fuck it up. This is going to be bad. Whatever, that's going to come to fruition. Because your thought is how you view the world. It's how you go into the world.
Yeah.
But what if you don't? What if you're like, I'm going to slay the hell out of this? And you do. It's like everything's perceptive or perspective. Like it's.
Yeah. It is.
I sympathize for people who kind of live on the ladder of that.
Yeah.
But there's so much science and there's so much just research about it's not your brain. It's not just like it's not a natural thought. You're in control of that. Like you are in control of those insane
Absolutely.
thoughts.
Here's another one. It's hard to take the compliments from my clients. Is it really?
Yeah. It's hard to take compliments in general. That's something that I'm still working through. I'm still actively in therapy with that, Praise is, don't praise me. Like you said, congratulations. I was like, cool, thanks. That's a tough one. Like I can't even like elaborate on that. Accepting the praise is just, it's kind of like a no shit. Like, of course I have to perform at a top level and give my whole all into this. Like, no shit, but yeah, that's a tough one.
But when
I think
you
that's a
do
tough one
it,
for a lot of people.
when you achieve that goal of performing at a top level, shouldn't you recognize that that's worthy of praise?
Yes. And I recognize that now. I'm actively trying to practice living in the present and living in and truly listening. That's a hard one. Listening to the words that come out of people's mouths when they give me praise,
I like that a lot because a lot of people don't really, and I don't either. I'm guilty of that, but I think that's really important. I like that you said that.
Actively listening it's a tough one, especially as a high performing individual. There's a podcast that I just listened to, and then it talked a lot about high performers and why they struggle with that. And it's just simply because it's kind of an expectation of yourself. So like, no shit, you're going to do it. But ultimately, like, not everybody's doing that. So you should just allow the compliment to sit and be proud of yourself. Being proud of yourself is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. We were told early on when my wife and I had kids to encourage them to be proud of themselves and try to teach them that that's really important versus, mommy or daddy being proud of them. And then they would constantly seek that kind of approval from us versus get it from themselves, which is much more powerful. So we often say that still, although less now because they're early teenagers. And so it gets a little bit eye roll, if you keep saying it, but we've tried to give them that,
That skill. Well, hey,
Yeah.
are you proud of yourself for the consistency with the podcast?
Hell yeah. Are you kidding me? And I'll
That's
take
amazing.
all the compliments that I can get. No, so listeners, before we started recording, Lisa and I were talking about podcasting, and I was doing a little math on how long we've been doing the hair game because I don't often think about the details. And so I told Lisa that we're 7.5 years into it, haven't missed a week in 7 years. And we were talking about consistency. And so that's why she asked that question. And so this is a good segue into the podcast part of the conversation, because Lisa was saying that she had just gone to a podcast conference. And I think it's pretty interesting that you did that. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your experience with podcasting? Why did you start? What kind of podcast have you been doing, and why you went to what you were hoping to get from the conference?
So I'm going to keep it real and keep it honest as to why I initially started the podcast. And this will give you just a glimpse of the history. So I initially started the podcast, and this is no joke. I was married, and my husband wouldn't listen to me worth shit. But he was very musical. So I felt if I could say how I really felt through audio, and if he could listen to it, this is how fucking insane this is, right? This is fucking insane.
This is amazing.
So
My wife is going to start a podcast tomorrow.
Just for you to listen, right? Any woman take note, any man take note, But yeah, he would always send me songs. So I was like, okay, maybe this dude just can't listen for shit if you speak it, but maybe if he listens to it, So I started initially the podcast. It was called Hi Hello with Lisa G. And I would talk about how I feel about him on this podcast. And I would send him the episodes, and my God, the guy was dumber than a box of rocks. He'd be like, is this about me? And I'm like, who the fuck else would it be? Who else am I talking about? Anyway, wow. There's a reason why.
Okay.
There's a reason why I'm not married anymore.
So he did actually listen. I was wondering if, as you were telling the story, I'm thinking this dude didn't listen to the podcast. But I guess if you didn't send it to him saying that this is about you, it's more likely that he'd listen to it.
Right. Yeah. No, he wouldn't have listened to it unless I sent it to him.
Right.
And even honestly, I don't even know if he listened to it then. But either way,
right.
That's initially how I started the podcast, and then it kind of evolved, and it just became like a diary of me talking shit, essentially. I talked a lot about like my family, my traumas with my family. Like it helped me heal. But then this new version, this new wave. So the podcast has actually changed 3 times. It used to be called Hi Hello with Lisa G. Then it became the Fuck You mentality. And that was being so authentically yourself my slogan is be so authentically yourself and so unapologetically yourself inspires others to do the same. Excuse me. And I was just talking about like the raw side of the industry, the raw side of entrepreneurship. But then my father passed away about 9 months ago. And thank you. There's a long story with that, but we made amends, and this angry, like sad version of myself kind of died with him.
Interesting.
So the fuck you mentality, which was this very like rough, brash, like fuck everything, mentality, died. And so we rebranded to Unapologetically You with Lisa G. And now I more so talk about entrepreneurism and what it looks like, and kind of peeling back the curtains with it, and sex and love, relationships as an entrepreneur, and also the beauty industry as well. But it's more so about
entrepreneurial sex. Is that what
entrepreneurial sex? Yeah, entrepreneurial sex. That's what we're talking about. I think that sounds
like a phenomenal topic.
I have a good podcast of talking about it. A good episode talking about it. You just got a listener
right here.
Great, because hear me out. It's different. As an entrepreneur, sex is viewed very differently. Maybe I'm just putting it into a category, but as like the everyday world, like sex is a tool. Sex is a very important role in keeping us balanced. Sex is a very healthy thing. Like sex is such a taboo topic, but it's very healthy. So
you're talking about your sex life, your personal sex life, and how it interplays with the entrepreneurial experience.
In one episode.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it's kind of all encompassing. So like relationships, brand relationships, even just like the day to day of being an entrepreneur. Right. Just the inner workings of an entrepreneur, and then I have other entrepreneurs as well. Come on.
Yeah, that's cool.
and like talk about their thing too. Yeah.
So what did you learn at the podcast conference?
I would say the biggest thing was consistency. That was the biggest takeaway was consistency. You have to be consistent with how much you post, which is very true with anything, right?
And when you
But I
say
didn't
post,
like
you talked about
or uploading.
publishing episodes. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So how like you are consistent and right, and you have a very successful podcast. It goes without
Thanks.
saying because you're consistently posting. That was the number one thing, and then the other thing was monetization.
Ah,
There's so
yeah,
much money we leave on the table with podcasting. Like podcasting is like underrated with monetization.
yeah.
There's ads, what they say, pragmatic ads, and there was another
Programmatic.
programmatic. Thank you. Yeah, you probably you know.
Well, we don't. I mean, we have. I think Wella. We're kind of dipping our toe in with that with Wella, but I mean, it's not a significant. It's not a meaningful amount of money at all.
Sure.
The reality of podcasts like ours is that it's a very specific kind of audience, and so it doesn't have broad-based appeal, over the broad population. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is kind of funny. I do have friends who are not hairstylists or beauty professionals, and they listen to the podcast, which is really funny because they're solo entrepreneurs and whatever. They're like an artist or they're a landscaper or something, and so they actually glean a lot of business advice based off of what hairstylists do, in their studios and in their salons. But for the most part, it's just beauty professionals. And, I think we're on the higher end of our audience, within our kind of little sector, but we're not close to providing a size of audience that, a big company is willing to pay for, because it's going to move the needle on product sales. It's just, I never expected that would be the case, and it's not really the case now. So I don't expect for this ever to be a money making thing. This is absolutely a money wasting thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yes,
Donovan,
I get that.
we have to pay Donovan, right? Donovan
Yeah.
has his own expenses. And, but anyway, I'm ranting about it.
No, but you're totally right. Like even with myself, by my podcast, I was telling my girlfriend Jess, I was like, I don't like. I talk to hairdressers. Like this is not like a wide thing, but
Right.
there's still like other like little ways where you can make money off of a podcast. And just like they were talking about like I guess there's like a YouTube thing. There's a Spotify thing. I don't even know. Definitely told me a lot.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what I really, really liked about the podcast is it talked a lot about community and how using your podcast to build a community and then to obviously like launch other products it's a funnel. That's all podcasts. That's how I look at my podcast. It's simply a funnel for all the other outlets.
Right.
So yeah, it was a cool event.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. All right. So how
Learned
do
a
you
lot.
split your time these days? You have these varying pulls and tugs on your time with the education, you have clients, right? I mean,
I do.
you're pretty mobile. You have clients in various different parts of Southern California. So how much time are you spending behind a chair with a client, and how much time are you spending doing other things like educating and podcasting?
We're at a really interesting crossroad right now. I just signed with Paul Mitchell. I'm one of the first pro
Congratulations.
partners. Thank you very much. That was a huge, big deal. And now I've been manifesting for quite some time. So I'm a big manifester. Something has to change because right now I'm like 3 days behind the chair, and the other days that I'm working on my own company, my own content, podcasting, now the partnership. And I'm in an interesting position. I really need to cut back being behind the chair because it's a lot of mental load. And I've recognized with myself that I've not been able to show up as much as I can mentally for my clients, and that's not fair to them. So yeah, we're in a little bit of a pickle.
Mm-hmm.
I got to scale back, and I'm hoping to make those changes fully happening at least by June. Give
Okay.
me the next 6 to 8 weeks to really kind of figure things out. But yeah, I'm there 3 days a week at least, still taking clients all day long,
Yeah.
filming where I can and editing where I can. It's a lot. It's a tough balance, and I do it all by myself.
Yeah, which makes it even harder. All right. Well, we'll
Yeah.
be watching you for sure. And to one of my favorite questions now, I call it the wave the wand question. If you could wave a
Ooh.
wand and change anything about the industry at all, what would it be?
Oh, geez.
Yeah, you're Queen Lisa.
What would I
Queen
change about the
Lisa,
industry?
queen of the beauty industry. Here's your wand. What are you going to change?
What am I going to change? You know what? I would say the approach of most education. I think kind of tying back to what I've said before, I can teach till I'm blue in the face how to do hair. But if you don't believe in yourself, what I teach doesn't matter. So I would love for the approach to education to be a bit different. I think there's a lot of education about technique, which is very, very important. But ultimately, again, if the stylist doesn't see them in their shoes, they will not apply. And I say this because I've had a couple of people come to me saying that they've taken education from very big educators, and they didn't feel relatable because they were up here and they got
Yeah.
made to feel kind of down here. And so there needs to be there needs to be a bridge between that, and bringing a sense of like relatability to the education itself, and giving tools to stylists on how to combat kind of like the everyday stressors and everyday anxiety and things like that, to then apply and like push themselves and challenge themselves to try new techniques or to try the technique they just paid $1,000 for.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. All right.
Thank
Any
you.
last words for the community?
I'm going to leave it how I leave everything. Be so unapologetically yourself that it inspires others to do the same. And if you feel that you are in a position where you're not growing, you feel complacent, and you don't feel that you are living your full potential, I challenge you to be curious about that. Because you just really, I never thought in a million years I'd be on a podcast with Eric,
Hmm.
talking on this podcast, or even just any podcast or even any things that I've done. But it all started with just being curious about this potential of myself, but living so unapologetically myself that it got me to where I am now.
Yeah, I love it. Wise words, Lisa G. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be on the podcast. Thank you.